Whether you work in a small, medium, or large business, you need to have a DRP or a disaster recovery plan in place. This plan is imperative to know what your company will do in the case of a disaster. What is the DR plan? What is the DRP? What is it about? So you want to have your usual sections in this document. You know, who is this document for? You want to have such as an overview, a scope, an audience, those sort of sections where you can fill out that are going to be relevant for your organization. You then got what's called a DRPO or disaster recovery plan organization. So in the case of a disaster, there needs to be an allocated group of people available or allocated that they know what their responsibilities, what their roles and their responsibilities are in the case of a disaster. This could be perhaps members of the board. It could be members of, upper IT management. Could be members of your HR, your finance committees, for example. In an IT scenario, you're going to have members such as particular technical people that have particular technical skills to be able to invoke and actually get your systems up and running and be the central points of contact when it comes to your disaster recovery operations. You want to have a DR coordinator in place as part of your organization. This is the person that is essentially going to be running the show, the ones who are going to initiate a DR scenario, the ones that are going to be in contact with all the necessary parties, the third parties, and the people that are inside your business to be able to go and coordinate and effectively execute this disaster recovery plan. You'll also then have your DR infrastructure team. Now, depending on the size of your organization, this group could be small, could be large. You may have a small group that can sort of bundle together into this infrastructure team, or you could have more specialized roles. But your infrastructure team will generally be made up of some form of infrastructure management, somebody that's responsible for the network, someone that's responsible for servers, for storage, for security. You want to have people who are now going to be responsible for restoring or giving the best direction to restore services on top of the infrastructure, right? So people such as your database admins, if you've got third-party software, whether you have to go to third-party providers outside that can actually give you advice on how to restore certain systems. So this is going to be a group of people, whether you have one pool of application DR people or whether you're breaking it up, there needs to be people on here that will be able to be contactable in the case of a disaster to be able to restore the applications to the infrastructure once the infrastructure is all back up and running. Picking the group of people that you are going to have as part of your organization is extremely important. You want to make sure that there are people that are reliable. You want to make sure that there are people that you can call up at 3 a.m. when the building has burned down or your data center has gone and they're available and they know how to do their thing. You don't want to have people on board that are going to be delaying your process of you getting your operations back up and running. What is the communication plan? What is the medium going to be for us to communicate with everybody? If your emails are still up, let's say in the scenario where your data center is gone, but your emails are cloud-based, they're hosted up on the Cloud Office 365 or something like that, you may still be able to contact people via email, but the best scenario is definitely to have some sort of phone. There could be a particular phone number that you've got configured that is used for disasters only, but you need to outline what your communication plan will be. What is the communication medium going to be? And where is the assembly area going to be? In the case of a disaster, where do we go? Where do we assemble? The incident type, response, and recovery. What has happened? How do we respond? And how fast do we respond? First one is incident type. What has happened? Now, there are many, many different types of incidents, right? A disaster may not just be the building burning down. We need to find somewhere else to set up shop and get all our IT back up and running. There should be various different types of incident types listed in your disaster recovery plan. Things such as your data center is unavailable or your comm center is unavailable. Your head office is unavailable. Your network is down. Perhaps your ISP is unavailable. Your telecom provider is now no longer available. That would be scenario for disaster because you can't communicate with anything. Loss of a primary server, a loss of a storage medium, a loss of a network device inside of your comm center. If your primary SAN or your primary storage medium is gone and all of your servers are gone, that's case for a disaster. A power failure, your building or your data center has run out of power. The UPS systems, the backup generators are all gone, they're run out. Cyber and hacking attack disasters. These are coming more and more common every single day, but they are a real threat where a business has been infected, systems are available, you perhaps got ransomware, you're getting pop-ups everywhere, your systems are out of whack, you have to invoke disaster recovery. Environmental pandemic or other. These are things that are out of your control. There's been a natural disaster. There's some sort of virus going around, bubonic plague, some crazy stuff going on. There's a war going on. These sort of disasters are very rare, but they are very real, and they're very real in a lot of places. So each one of these incidents will initiate a different response and recovery. In some scenarios, it could be fairly quick to get things up and running again. In other scenarios, it could be a lot longer. It could be days, it could be weeks, it could be months. Really depends on the particular incident type. So for example, in the case where perhaps you've got a power outage and your UPS has run out of battery, that could be literally only a couple of hours until your power company gets back up online. Or perhaps your fuse box is blown up and you need to call an electrician out to fix that. That could be only a matter of time to get things up and running. If your data center has burnt down, it's no longer available, that could be several days or weeks because it requires you to set up shop in a new data center, purchase new equipment, recover data, etc. So what I'll have in my DRP is I will have my incident type, let's say loss of data center, and then all of my response and recovery underneath each of that, and a big outline of exactly what we will do in this scenario. I'll then move on to the next incident type. There's been a plague, right? What do we do in that scenario? There's now been a power outage. What do we do in this scenario? So you break it down based on the scenario. There's no point in having a single DR plan for one sort of incident because every incident will require a different response. What is the role now of your disaster recovery organization? So this plan that we talked about, this organization plan that we talked about, where you've got your coordinators, you've got your infrastructure team, you've got your application guys, what is their roles now? What are they responsible for doing? Once the fire is out, this is post incident, once your fire is out and everything is now back up and running, you now need to review your disaster recovery plan and how it all went. So my general recommendation is within 7 days, get everybody involved, all the necessary parties involved together in a big meeting room and discuss what happened, how did we go, what can we do better next time. Down the bottom of my DRP, I will have a section of all of my key contacts. Every single contact that's involved in disaster. So we're talking about the organization, your key contacts, which were your primary stakeholders, perhaps board members, people who will sign off, any third-party companies that need to get involved. For example, a contact at Microsoft, a contact at Dell, a contact at HP, a contact at EMC, all these contacts that you may need to consult in the case of a scenario, a disastrous scenario. Underneath that area, have an area where you have outlines of perhaps what your infrastructure currently looks like. Have some network diagrams, a LAN diagram, a WAN diagram for your overall approach of what your WAN looks like. Have pictures of your rack diagrams, of all of your photos, pictures of your comms cabinets, maybe a list of all of your servers, a list of all of your core applications, a list of anything that you will need, anything that is core to your business, have it listed in this disaster recovery, in the summary down the bottom, in this disaster recovery plan. So once you have an established DRP plan, there should be places where you can easily access it. You should have printable copies because if your networks are infected, if your systems are down, you need physical printed copies. There could be copies given to certain VIPs, certain partners in your organization. Make sure that there are multiple copies so that in the case of a DR, you do have copies available to be able to follow. So I hope you found this helpful and we'll see you next time.